Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to June on the Range 2024, a great BookTube event created by Michael K. Vaughan, where we all read Westerns in the month of June. I've been having a blast with June on the Range. I haven't been sharing everything that I've been reading, but I've been having a blast. I've been doing a large amount of Western reading. I find it so interesting and also so entertaining. When these things are good, they're really good. I bought Westerns all year long and saved them for this event. And it's winding down. June on the Range is winding down. I read a book last night that I got yesterday in the mail from someone, or someone sent me a box full of books. Always nice. That was very nice to do. Don't do it blind. Email me and ask me, show me pictures of the books, but otherwise, wonderful. And I read this last night, Valley of the Sun. This is a posthumous 1995 short story collection by Louis L'Amour, the great Western author Louis L'Amour, and uh, I don't know this author's bibliography anywhere near as much as some people do. There are some people out there, I'm sure, who are past masters of everything that he ever wrote. I didn't do any research on this ahead of time. I certainly didn't feel like doing any afterwards to find out whether or not any of these stories had appeared previously. I'm assuming they all did, since this book came out almost a decade after he died. I'm assuming that all of these stories appeared in print somewhere else. There's no way that he could have a whole book full of short stories sitting around unpublished. Uh, I went into it rather curious about the difference between Louis L'Amour, the novelist, and Louis L'Amour, the short story writer. He had a fluid shuttling back and forth between those two things. He would write a short story, then a couple of years later, he would think maybe if I add 100 pages to it, it could be a novel. He would write little bits and sketches and then make them into short stories and then paste and patch those together into a novel. And he would also write whole scale, just fresh novels. So he moved back and forth between those forms quite a bit, and that makes judging which one he does better a little bit blurry. I think I like Louis L'Amour, the novelist, more than I like Louis L'Amour, the short story writer. When he's writing a novel from fresh material as a novel, I think I prefer that Louis L'Amour to this Louis L'Amour. Uh, Generally speaking, I find that in his novels, the real novels, the fresh from the start novels, uh, he's less prone to simplicity. This is an author he knew the Western genre backwards and forwards. I think there's a strong argument to be made that he created the Western genre. And the Western genre, the cheesy 25-cent paperbacks, the dime store paperbacks, they have a whole bunch of gimmicks to them. Some of the gimmicks are, in fact, prejudices. And a lot of the other gimmicks, they aren't prejudices, but oh God, do they creak. They shouldn't happen. And if you're writing a real complex, layered novel, like I would argue some of the Sackett novels are, then you won't do that. If you have any sense of self when you're there, when you're sitting there at the manual typewriter, you won't pull out a cheesy old Ringo Kid gimmick in such a book. You'll be aiming a little higher. I hate that kind of terminology, but authors do think that way. And when you're writing short stories, you if you're Louis L'Amour and you're churning out short stories, you almost have to rely on those gimmicks. You almost have to. On the sun hitting a wall at a certain angle and revealing a hidden map, or uh, things like that. The tenderfoot who finds a soul of steel inside himself. You can work around those gimmicks. They won't actually make the story if your story is longer and more complex. But if it's a short story and you've got a day to write it for $50, you might hope that energetic prose will make your audience skate right past those things. You'll put them in there, but you'll hope that they'll skate right past them because you're telling the story so well. And that happens in here in a lot of these stories, and it works. If Louis L'Amour at that manual typewriter thought, well, I know this is a little bit shop worn, but I'm pretty sure that I can carry the reader through it because I'll tell the hell out of it. If he thought that over that manual typewriter, he was right. Almost always, he was right. Uh, And that happens in a number of these stories. As with any short story collection, there are going to be things that are better than others, and also things that I prefer over others. Louis L'Amour had a recurring character called the Cactus Kid that I have a sweet spot for. I don't know why. He's one of the most hackneyed and gimmicky characters that Louis L'Amour ever made. But I have a sweet spot for him. And his adventures, his various adventures. There's always a winsome kind of element to them. I'm not 100% sure that in any Cactus Kid story Louis L'Amour ever really clearly delineates the Cactus Kid's age, but from his actions and his yearnings and his lovelorn life, I like to think of him as a teenager. I like to think of him as a good 5, 6, even 10 years younger than the usual Western protagonist. And he's in Medicine Ground is one of the longer short stories in here, and he's the star of that show, and I liked it the most of all the stories in here. Some of the others struck me as sketches. In fact, the first story in here, We Shape the Land with Our Guns. I wouldn't be surprised if it was just a few hastily scrawled pages of outline that someone else whipped into shape. I don't know how Louis L'Amour worked. I would imagine him as the type that wrote everything longhand before he typed anything or had anybody type anything. But I don't know that. He had a lot of experience in the pulps, so he might have known his way around a manual typewriter. And I can tell you, you won't get to this on the Dude Bro channels because there are grifters who are lying about everything they say. But I can tell you, once you, how to put this delicately, how to put this without, well, you all know me anyway, so it doesn't matter. Once you have a lot of experience hunched over a manual typewriter, hacking out prose for money, not much money, but money, once you've done that a little, none of you, those of you who are born in the 21st century don't know what I mean when I talk about a manual typewriter. You should Google it. When you Google it, when you see pictures of it, you're not going to believe that it could be used as a machine. It looks too cumbersome. But it was not only used as a machine, but like I would bet Louis L'Amour and like a whole bunch of other writers in his genre and in his time, it was a part of me. It felt like a part of me. I knew my manual typewriter, which had been my father's, backwards and forwards. I could have disassembled it blindfolded and put it back together. I knew every part. I knew exactly how to cobble things together. I knew what was wrong and how to fix it. It was all iron. It wasn't no software, but I knew that machine really, really well. And it saved me on a whole bunch of occasions. And I don't mean just financially. It's weird. It's hard to describe, but I still have the thing. I still have it. I would never in a million years get rid of it, even though I'm never going to use it again. I don't even know how I would use it again. I'm not sure there's a place anywhere within 100 miles that sells the ink ribbon that you needed in order to make words on a manual typewriter. I'm not sure that such a place even exists anymore. Forever and ever, across the river in Cambridge, there was a place called University Typewriter. I don't know if they exist anymore. I wouldn't use a manual typewriter now anyway, because the whole point of a manual typewriter, the whole point of me using it with ditto pages or with whiteout or whatnot or a correct type, the whole point of all of that was to work up prose that could then be disseminated to a reading public. That was the whole point of doing it. If you didn't care about a reading public, you would write longhand on yellow legal pads. But I did, and so did every other writer that I knew, and that was just the means to the end. Well, now that's the dumbest, worst way to reach any kind of a reading public, because it's a dead end. But anyway, what was the point of what I was trying to say here? What was the point of what I was trying to say here? Why did I go on with manual typewriters? I don't remember. I don't remember what my actual point was, but I can easily bootstrap it because the opening scene here, I picture as something as notes that Louis L'Amour took but never wrote. I could be wrong about that. It's possible that every story in here has a printed provenance. But some of them seemed like sketches, whereas something like Medicine Ground, a genuine Cactus Kid adventure from start to finish, well crafted. I can believe that was first written and then typed and then retyped and then proofed somewhere along the way. Somewhere somehow. There's no copyright information in this book. And I guess maybe Louis L'Amour worked really fast. Maybe it's possible that he had lots and lots of material that could be called together into books. But the Cactus Kid story in here, and there was one other. What was the other major offender in here? The title story, Valley of the Sun. Those stories really indulge in Western gimmicks. They really, really do. To the point where you groan. Now, if it's Louis L'Amour and I'm groaning in affection. I love him as a writer on the page. I loved him as a writer on the page before June on the Range, but June on the Range really made me see that if you're talking about something that you can call writing magic, this guy's got it. Whatever it is, this guy's got it. So I don't mind when I get a gimmick of his in the Cactus Kid story. The bad guys, they hate him, they want him dead, but of course they don't kill him. Villains never just do that. Instead, they strap him to an anthill and give him little cuts so that he's bleeding, so that when the sun comes up and heats up the anthill, they'll all come out in their thousands and swarm all over him and eat him to pieces. In the story, the Cactus Kid mentions, he's thinking to himself, that he remembers a time when he was called on to help remove a body from an anthill of a person who had been similarly tortured to death, and that it was a horrible and impressive sight. I'm assuming the impressive part was how much damage the ants were able to do, and it seems hopeless. The bad guys are right there. No one knows where the Cactus Kid is. He is immobilized on the anthill, and he's groping around. Never say die. He's groping around with his leather thongs when suddenly his fingers encounter an arrowhead. Or it's always an arrowhead or a sharp rock or a piece of broken glass. A little bit of Frida yoga for the end of June on the Range. Oh, stretch those glutes, baby. When that happened, I just groaned because that is basically Deus Ex Machina. Basically, that's just a cop out on the part of the writer. But the Cactus Kid always gets the girl in the end, and the bad guys got theirs. They get theirs in every one of these stories. I ended up just loving this. I don't know what it is. I don't really tend to burden BookTube event books with much research, so I don't know what this is. I know that it's posthumous, but I don't know what these stories are. But I enjoyed them. And I don't know how this means I'm going to send out June on the Range. Am I going to read another short story collection? Another Louis L'Amour novel that I got in yesterday's surprise gift box is also a collection of short stories. Should I end up on that? It seems kind of fitting. When I started June on the Range 2024, I was worried that I was going to make it all Louis L'Amour. It seems kind of fitting to end this way, and with print books. And a leather-bound thing on top of that. Maybe I'll do that for tonight, another short story collection, and we'll just go out that way. I want to squeeze in one more night before the end of June on the Range. So that's my report for today. Valley of the Sun, ups and downs. It's a short story collection, so you're going to have ups and downs almost always. It had some high points to me that made it worth the whole book. I mean, I read another Louis L'Amour short story collection, Outlaws of Mesquite, that also had a Cactus Kid story and also had a couple of high points to the stories that made the whole collection for me. So I don't really care how weak the other things are. There was one thing in here that was tremendously weak. What was it? That /7 kid had all the elements that you would think would make me like it, but I didn't like it at all. So this is the price you pay with a short story collection, but I think I might go out with more Louis L'Amour. I don't know if it'll be the end of the trail, but it might be How the West Was Won, which I also got yesterday. We shall see. I will throw something on the pile tonight, and I will report back tomorrow for my last trip down the June on the Range trail for 2024. I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.